I think it's safe to say that 2016 has been a pretty contentious year. And now that we're coming to the end of it, I think it's probably a good time to look back and see what big events changed the course of Magic for the future. I'm Dennis from Windmill Slam, and these are the top 5 changes to Magic in 2016. 2 years ago, Wizards shook up the way that sets are released by moving from 3 set blocks to 2 set blocks. This was done in an attempt to keep things fresh and to try and answer what R&D calls the third set problem. This is a combination of failed expectations and world fatigue of being on the same plane for too long. Along with this change came the removal of the core set and a radical change in the way that Standard rotated. It would now rotate twice a year instead of once. Some people felt that this made the format too shifting and resulted in a Standard that was very difficult to keep up with. So, in October of this year, Wizards reverted back to a once-a-year rotation. For example, this means that Kaladesh is legal for 2 full years rather than 18 months. This is a positive change for players, sure, but this signifies more than that. It shows a readiness on Wizards' part to respond to player opinion, which is something that they've not always been the best at, and something that a lot of corporations in general struggle with. Granted, this announcement comes 2 years after the original change, but these things always take time, and it is always nice to see that Wizards is happy to respond in an honest, concise way and give their reasons for why they're reverting to this change, and people seem pretty happy with it so far. There was no Community Cup this year. For those of you that don't know what that is, it's when Wizards selects a group of members of the community and content creators and brings them to Seattle to battle against a team of WotC employees in a variety of wacky formats. In Trick Jarrett's own words, the calendar ran out on the Community Cup this year. But the same post goes on to highlight some other community events that Wizards have started running. Things like Loading Ready Run's pre-release, an event where they invite Magic personalities and content creators to host a pre-release a week before the ordinary pre-release, with some members of WotC staff peppered in as well.
I'm joined here by 2 of my writers, actually. Adam Staborski, Stibbs from TCGplayer, and Maria Bartoli from Magic the Amateuring.
It's a big streaming event, and it's a whole lot of fun and a great way to get a feel for the new cards before the pre-release rolls around. There's the Community Super League, which actually fills a lot of the roles that the old Community Cup used to. A group of streamers and Magic personalities are selected to compete in a variety of silly formats, just on Twitch rather than in person at the Wizards of the Coast offices. This replicates the fun-loving, get-together feeling of the Community Cup, just in a slightly more modern way. There's the Community Ambassador program that I was fortunate enough to be a part of. This is where content creators from around the world are invited to the events that Magic hosts at PAX. This year that meant attending the Kaladesh Street Fair and all the huge announcement panels and everything that they did. I might be a little bit biased because I went, but it really was one of the most exciting, enjoyable experiences of my entire life. And being there with all these other people and getting to mingle and meet, you know, the professor and meet Magic the Amateur and things like that really did make Magic feel a little bit more like a community to me. And hopefully for an audience, seeing us be together and covering the same things gives a similar sense as well. It's important to note that at the end of the post, Trick emphasizes that the Community Cup is by no means dead, but that they're going to have to restructure the way they look at community events in the future. As a whole, though, I think Wizards handled the community this year very well. Stick with me on this one. The folks behind Magic Online have been promising leagues for a very, very long time. And last year we got the first glimpse at constructed leagues. And then in March of this year we got sealed leagues, and leagues made the jump from constructed to limited. This was all fine and pretty widely accepted as a good thing, but it wasn't until draft leagues came out that there was a little bit of controversy. Cross-pod pairings meant that you would play against players who weren't in your draft pod, and a lot of people didn't like this. Now, I'm not here to debate my stance on cross-pod pairing. I personally think that they're totally fine and that it's more than worthy a trade-off. But this does highlight something very important. Magic Online is moving away from being a direct emulation of the paper game. This might not sound like that big of a deal, but it really is. A lot of the hang-ups and gripes that people have with Magic Online are a direct result of it having to keep pace and be an exact copy of the paper game. Wizards is showing a willingness to do something that isn't done in paper, cross-pod pairing, pairings and drafts to achieve something that's not possible on paper, having instantaneous opponents available all of the time. As someone who films draft videos, having the time it takes to do a Magic Online draft reduced benefits me greatly, so I acknowledge that I'm a little bit biased. But this is another indicator that Wizards is doing something new with digital Magic. Magic Digital Next, a term mentioned at the Hasbro investors meeting, is rumoured to be some all-encompassing product that replaces both Magic Online and Duels, but that's something we're going to have to wait till next year to hear more about. Magic has struggled a little bit with its identity. With eSports on the rise and showing no signs of slowing down, there's a question as to whether Magic should try to distinguish itself or adopt a more if you can't beat them, join them kind of attitude. This last year, it seems like Wizards is opting a little bit more for the latter. Firstly, they changed the way the top 8 works at the Pro Tour. The tournament is now structured in such a way that first and second in the top 8 go straight through to the semi-finals, and 5th through 8th have to compete among themselves to see who gets to play the players in 3rd and 4th in the second round of the quarterfinals. This means that players in 1st and 2nd only have to win 2 matches to win the whole Pro Tour, whereas someone in 5th has to win 4. Previously, the difference between getting into the top 8 at first and getting in at 8th wasn't really that big, but now it's astronomical. This serves to dissuade players from intentionally drawing or intentionally conceding in the later rounds, and it essentially is part of an initiative by Wizards to get pro players to play more games, which is better for viewing Magic as a competitive sport. While there was initially some pushback to this announcement, generally speaking it's been viewed pretty positively publicly. In addition to that, Wizards has changed the way the Platinum level Pro tier works. They've introduced Pro Tour teams. You can even see rumblings of that before at Worlds, where players were given jerseys reminiscent of the jerseys worn by other popular esports competitors. And for next year, an extra $50,000 has been added to the prize pool for Worlds. 2016 was a big year for changes in organised play, but 2017 is going to be the year where we see a lot of those things come to fruition. I won't lie, it's a little weird talking about a presidency this year without it sparking a huge argument. But in June, Wizards welcomed its new president Chris Cox, who would take over the reins from previous president Greg Leeds. Cox comes from 8 years of management at Microsoft, and his input could be the reason behind a lot of these changes that we're seeing this year, but it won't be until next year that we really see the direction he wants to take the company in. I was supposed to have a chance to meet the man himself at GP London, but scheduling didn't really work out. But by all accounts, he seems to be a really perfect fit for the job.
Gosh, I started playing Dungeons & Dragons when I was 8 years old in 1981, Axis and Allies shortly thereafter, and then I started playing Magic when I was a junior in college around 1994 and 1995.
He's a long-time D&D and Magic player and seems to have a vested interest in making the game as good as it can be. Magic has been growing consistently release after release ever since it had its renaissance a couple of years ago, and it's important for Wizards to try and conserve that momentum. Having a president come in from a company like Microsoft, a company so focused on digital products and gaming, will hopefully help drag a 23-year-old game at this point into the modern era. Perhaps Magic Digital Next is part of this move, and we'll have to see where Chris ends up taking the company next year, but it's certainly exciting times for Wizards of the Coast. Between the community changes, the Pro Tour changes to Magic Online, and a new president, I really think this has been a big year for Magic, and I think we've come out of it pretty well. If you have something that you think was a bigger change that didn't make my list, please let us know in the comments below. Other than that, happy holidays from me, and happy holidays from all of us here at TCGplayer.